Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we're Masechtas Nedarim daf Lamed Ches. We're going to begin on Lamed Ches and Aleph, about 5 lines from the top. Omer Rabbi Chama, Rab Chanina, Lo He'isher Moshe. Moshe did not become wealthy. El mipsulatan shaluchos, rather from the leftover pieces of the luchos. Shnemer psalocha shne luchos avonim karishonim psulatan shalcha. Saying that the psilus, the leftovers, which is made from sapphire, that is yours, and therefore that was something of great value, and therefore that's how Moshe became rich. Yehei, it shall be for him. Interesting that maybe that's why it's called Torah's Moshe, that the Torah was given specifically to Moshe and his children. However, not necessarily to all of Klal Yisrael. Shnemer k'savlecha, that should be written for you. Psalocha, that should be engraved for you. Ma p'soltan shalcha, just like the psilus, the leftover pieces are yours. Av k'savan shalcha, so to whatever is written on the Seres Dibros, that's also yours. Namely, the Torah is given specifically to you. So in this, Moshe nahig b'tavis ayin. However, Moshe did something very generous, v'nasli Yisrael, and he gave the Torah over to Yisrael. V'alav omer tov ayin hu yivarach. So in this is question 7. Al mi nemar tov ayin, one who has a good eye will be blessed. Mahi tavis ayin shenahag. This is referring to Moshe Rabbeinu, that even though the Torah was given to him, shenahag tavis ayin, we're going to see is bilpulpuli Torah shenasli Yisrael. That Pilpuli Torah, we're going to see in a second, was something that he had specifically, and nonetheless he gave it over to Klal Yisrael, because otherwise it's hard to understand that what Moshe could have kept the whole Torah to himself and nothing to Klal Yisrael, because Meisiv Rav Chisda, he asked the following question: the Oisi Siva Hashem Beisahi Lamed Eschem, says the Ran, Alma de Hashem Sivahu Lamed Es Yisrael. He was commanded to teach the Torah to Klal Yisrael. So how could it be that he's the one who exclusively could have kept it? My answer is Oisi Siva V'ani Lachem, and I commanded V'ani Lachem, and I to you. In other words, I did it on my own. In other words, not that necessarily he actually had a chiyuv to have to give it over to Klal Yisrael, but he decided to do so on his own. Then the pasuk says, Re'ei lemadati eschem, I have taught the Bnei Yisrael chukim mishpatim kasher tzivani Hashem lokoi. So we see Beferish again, he's supposed to teach Torah, which means it's not his. So and then we ask another question. And now so on this already, again, it must be that was also given over to Klal Yisrael. So Hashiro Chuda. So maybe the only thing that was supposed to be given over to Klal Yisrael, which is kind of hard to understand, is Dafka the Shira, and that's it. So again, how is this Eidus if they weren't given the Torah? Ella, this is actually a strong proof, and therefore Pilpuli Ba'alma. Rather, when it came to what did Moshe give over, he gave over the Pilpuli Ba'alma. Says Rashi, L'havin davar mitaich davar, to understand one matter from the other. Hu denisin l'Moshe. This was what was given over to Moshe. The nig b'tavas ayin v'nasli Yisrael. But the Torah itself, no, that everything else was specifically given over to all of Klal Yisrael. However, the Pilpuli Torah is the exception. Question 13, TA. TA 13 says as follows. Similar question. Moshe nag b'Torah's Toivas ayin v'nasli Yisrael madua hashiv Toiva ayin v'hari nitzavu lamda. So he says Pilpuli ba'alma. Okay. So that's the answer. Amar Rav Yochanan, Ena Kadosh Baruch Hu Masha Shechinasai, Hashem will not place His divine presence on a person. Elal Gibor v'Asher v'Chacham Anav. You have to be strong, rich, wise, and humble. So Hashem doesn't place His Shechina on the downtrodden. You have to be someone who has a lot of positive, straight, great qualities, and that is who's Mishra Shechina. V'kulan Moshe. We see this all from Moshe. Gibor dechsev yifros es oil al hamishkan. So we see that he was able to spread the oil on the Mishkan, which means he had great strength. Yeramar Moshe Rabbeinu Parso. He's the one that did it. Duksiv Eser amos erchakarish. Each of the planks of these beams were 10 amos high. So ema de orech v'katan. Maybe they were tall, but they were weak beams. Ela min hadeinkra. From this pasuk, chsiv v'yes pois b'shnei haluchos. That he was holding on to these two tablets. V'ashlichem mi'al shtei yadav, and he threw them down. V'yashbereim, and they broke. V'tanya haluchos archan shisha v'rachman shisha v'avyan shloisha. These were very, very heavy tablets because they were 6 by 6 tfachim in length and width, and its thickness was 3. So therefore, how could someone physically be able to hold something so big and so heavy? It must be he was a gibor. Asher, how do we know he was rich? Because we said psalucha sultan shulcha yehei. We said that he's able to keep the leftover pieces, the remnants of the luchos, which was made out of sapphire, which is of great value. Chacham Rav Shmuel Demetavayu Chamishim Sharibina Nivru Ba'oil. There's 50 levels of knowledge in this world of understanding. They're all given to him, excluding one. He understood 49 of the 50. Shnemar v'tachserehu ma'at melkim. He missed just a little bit from Hashem, which means that he basically knew everything else, but anything else not. What's chutz mi'achas? So in this, the Ran says it's the idea that Hashem is barich, the actual knowledge of Hashem al mitaso and his absolute truth. That much he didn't have. The total foresight that only an omnipotent God is capable of having. On the ish Moshe anam oid beferish pasuk that he was humble. Amr Rav Yochanan kohen aviyim ashirim hayu. All the prophets were rich. Menoah Moshe u'mishmuel me'amois me'yoina. We see this from all these different Nevi'im. They all had the attribute of wealth. Moshe nechsev lo chamorecha michem nasasi. He says, I never even took a donkey, when he was claiming, again, unlike when it came to Kairach, I believe it was, that he said, unlike him, I never took anything. Now, Ibul Agra, Lafuki Man Deshakabul Agra. So, if someone who's not being paid is excluding someone who takes without a wage. So what exactly is he saying over here? If you look in the Ran, v'chi mishtabeach hayishlo natal schar. Is he praising that he took something like undeserved? El defil ba'agra means even wages. He didn't, even if he deserved it, he didn't take anything. Dilma mishum da'anihavi. So maybe the reason why he didn't have a chamor is because he was poor and he couldn't afford to buy a donkey. Ela min psalucha psultan yehei shalcha. Again, that's clear cut that he was rich. Shmuel dechsev hinni anu bi neged Hashem. That he says, I'll testify opposite Hashem, but neged Mashiach, and opposite the Anointed One. Eshor milokachti, almost the exact same lashon. Did I take a donkey? Chamor milokachti, and I take a donkey. Now ibachinam. If it was for nothing, lafukim man deshakal b'chinam. El defil b'schar. He says, then didn't even take wages. The dilma de anihavi. Maybe the reason why he didn't have a donkey or an ox is because he was too poor to pay for it. El mahacha uchuvaso haramasa kisham beso. That he would always go back whenever he would judge people. He never stayed in someone's house, but rather he went back to his house. That kisham beso. Yamarava kol makam shehalach beso imo. Wherever he went, his house was with him. Namely, he didn't go to someone else because he didn't need to. He had the financial wherewithal to be able to bring his whole house with him, and therefore wasn't an issue as far as because he was wealthy. Omarava, Golda Mashanember b'Shmuel Yaisim Mishanember b'Moshe. Great is what's said by Shmuel than by Moshe. The ilu b'Moshe Rabbeinu Ksiv lo chamarecha mehem nasasi. He says, I didn't take a donkey. Yafil b'schar, even for wages. The Yogami Shmuel feel b'ratzain. Even if people were willing to sell, lo sachru, he didn't do so. Dechsev v'yomru, and they said, lo shaktanu, it was not stolen. V'lo ratzo sanu v'goymer. Okay. So again, it just shows. Says the Ran, afil b'ratzon, the zimnin mitirtzu mishum ksufa v'lonichalahu. Possibly, sometimes it was embarrassment. He didn't want it. Almost the V'yan amois v'yomer el hamatzave lo navi anoichi lo ben navi anoichi. I'm not a prophet or a son of a prophet. Ki boiker anoichi. I am a shepherd. Uboiles shikamim. Kidam Targum Rav Yosef Ari Mari Geise. He says that I have many flocks. Anav Shikminli Bish Fel Ta, and I have many in this valley. So it shows he was wealthy. He gave Wade the payment. Vayered Ba, and he went down onto the ship. Yom Rav Yochanan Shanas and Sachara Shel Svina Kula. They basically paid for the entire boat. Amar was completely paid for. Amar Rav Roimonus Sachar Shel Svina Havoy Dalad Alafim Dinar Dahava. The boat's worth was 4,000 golden coins. Rav Yochanan, but Chilo Haymoshel Lami Taira. He learned the Torah. Umeshachcha. And it became forgotten until it was given as a gift. Okay, let's see in the next Mishnah. The zanis ishtov is banov. Afal pishu chay b'mizaynoisan. So if a person made a neder against this man, against the husband, so even though you made a neder against him that you're not allowed to give, he cannot get any hana from you, you can still give mazonos to this man's wife and to their kids, even though this man is still chayiv to give her mazonos. Why? So on this, the Ran says, the hamuder mishani. It seems like he's getting benefit because his wife's eating. He doesn't have to feed them. This is like an indirect hana. Okay. A person should not feed this man's animal. It doesn't matter if it's a kosher animal or a non-kosher animal. As the Ran says, you're feeding this animal, and this guy's getting hana because now it's getting bigger, and therefore because of this animal which has more pounds, it has more value. And therefore you can't do so. Rabbi Lezer Aimer, no. When it comes to a non-kosher animal in which it's just going to be plowing a field, it's not something which is going to be shechted, so it's not going to be for eating, so you could feed it. Because by feeding it, you're not really doing anything, because by getting it fatter, it's actually plumfa carrot. The guy's not getting hana, and all of a sudden you have a big animal that maybe is not as productive in its working. So therefore, you can feed a non-kosher animal. However, when it comes to giving mazonos, and the purpose is lepituma, is to fatten it up, so now all of a sudden this guy can shecht it, and there's more meat for him to eat, and therefore that is hana, and therefore because of it he can't do. So what's the difference between a kosher and non-kosher animal? Well, you shouldn't be able to do it either way. When it comes to a kosher animal, the nafsha, the blood, is the shemayim, because you can't eat the blood. However, gufa shalo, when it comes to the meat, you could eat it, and therefore because of that you're giving it hana. However, because now it's a bigger animal for this person to eat. Utameo, when it comes to a non-kosher animal, we continue on the chasam beis, nafsha v'gufa l'shemayim. Its blood and its flesh is l'shemayim, so you're not gaining anything by fattening it up. So no, afatamea nafsha l'shemayim v'gufa shalo. The truth is, the meat is yours. Well, meat, you can't eat a non-kosher animal. Yeah, you can't, but it's not asur b'hana. She'im yirtz, if you want, harihu moichel of kachavim o machil klavim. Now that it's bigger, so now you could sell this animal, this non-kosher animal, to a non-Jew, or feed it to your dogs, which is also mutter. You can feed a non-kosher animal to your dogs. You can't eat it, but your animals can eat it. So therefore, in that situation, he is giving you hana, because now all of a sudden these animals are fatter. Let's go back so we can see this round over here. As we said, Rabbi Lezer makes a chiluk between tameh and tahara. Since a non-kosher animal, there's no eating over here. You're not getting hana from this person who is from this madir. So question again is just feeding it. So just feeding it regularly, everyone's going to say it's usur because you have to feed your animals. However, this whole machlokis is referring dafka when it comes to fattening it up. By a kosher animal, we're talking about, again, you're fattening it up. So it's usur since you're doing it for eating it. But a non-kosher fattening is mutter since you can't eat it, and making it fat will just slow it down and not as good for work. And that's the reason why it would be mutter in this situation. So this is saying no, even for a non-kosher animal, it could also be lachila, as we see the Ran on Lav Chesamad Beis. Why? She'im yiratza harizeh moichel v'chachavim. She'oichel oisa, they'll eat it. Ukshi miputemes loichen oisa b'yoser. When this guy fattens it up for you, you can sell it for more money, so you're benefiting. The Rabbi Lezer lo shari b'tameya elo lezona lezonim mezainis yiserim. Only when it comes to feeding it extra food. Kedil fatma. Mishum desvir lady kivande inu oy medes lachila. Since it's non-kosher animals, not fit for you eating it. Elo malacha for work. Ein nehenen balam b'ptuma. When you fatten it up, he's not getting hana. And here's the amazing line: the adarabba mifanka tfei. You're going to make it more finicky. And veloy avda shaper. It's not going to work as hard if it's not a lean animal. So everyone holds that just feeding it what it needs to eat, that is certainly usur. So therefore that is the distinction. Question 8. Okay, we're going to get to Eved Kanani after in a second, so let's just hold off on that question until we move a little bit further. Fine. Okay, let's see the Gemara. Rav Yitzchak bar Chananya. Rav Huna, focusing on this is said in the name of Rav Huna. Hamuder hanoma chaveroi. So if a person makes a neder that he's not allowed to derive benefit from his friend, muter si es lo bito. You're still allowed to marry his daughter. So Haviva Rav Zera. So Rav Zera posed a question on Rav Huna. But my skinan, what do you mean? What are you talking about that you can marry this guy's daughter? Ilima, if you're talking about Bishanichsi Avikala Surin al Hechasan, we're talking about that the possessions of the Kala's father is usur on the Chasan. That the Chasan is not allowed to get hana from the possession of the father. So Hari Moisulu Shimcha was Shamsho. The Chasan is getting hana because now all of a sudden he has a wife and she's going to help him out and do things for him. So he doesn't have the burden of doing everything himself. Now he has a life partner. So that should not be allowed. How is it shaykh to say that this person is allowed to marry her in the event, because he's certainly getting hana when she's married to this woman, and he's not allowed to get hana from if the hana is against him, the chasan. Ela b'nichsi chasan asurin al avikala. We're talking about that the possessions of the chasan are usur to the kala's father. Which means the father can't get hana from the chasan. Now, what is the chasan getting in this situation? Gedola mizu amru, greater than this, zanes ishto v'esbanav. You can, as we saw in the Mishnah, you can feed the wife and their daughter and their sons. Even though he has to feed them. The ad amrit mutul asilo bito. And now you're telling me that he can even go and marry the daughter? So what you're saying must be b'shenichsik avikala surin al chasan. We're talking about the situation where the possessions of the kala's father is usur on the chasan. So if we're dealing with a chasan, it's usur onto the chasan. So the chasan is not to get hana. So we say like this: umavita bogeres. We're talking about a girl who's already bogeres, which means she's the one that really is doing the marriage herself, and she doesn't need her father's consent. Umedaita, and it's with her consent. So therefore, it has nothing to do with the father in this situation. You cannot marry the daughter, but this is only if she's a katana or a naira. You could marry if she's a bogeres with her consent. Okay, Stop for 1 second. Let's continue in the Ran. Hari moisul shimcha l'shamslo dekos l'chadatach debebitu naira skinon, and he's getting hana. Ela b'shenichse chasan asun al avi akal v'kamash one shavu b'shenichase asun al av mutulis l'bito. You can still marry the daughter. Alpha pishi is chayv l'zuna, even though the father normally feeds the daughter. So now all of a sudden he's taking that case. Achar kain v'nim semaneu. So it turns out that he's getting hana because now all of a sudden he's not supporting. He doesn't have to feed her anymore. So if we skip down to the Ran, kol shekain sheyuchel lazayin oisa, you're able to support her. Achar shenasa sheneschayim b'zaynis ishto. Makamash Rav Huna. What's the chiddush? You have to feed your wife. So he said we're talking about she's a bogeres. Kivan shebagra shuv ein lavi rishus ba. Therefore, the father has no rishus in her in this situation. Now the Gemara says, Amar Rav Yaakov Hamadir b'noi l'talmud Torah. So you have a father, and he wants his son to learn Torah, and therefore he says, I don't want you to do anything for me. He basically disconnects himself from his son, but he's only doing it, says the Ran, Kedei Shelo Yisbatel b'talmud Torah. He wants the son, who's a wonderful boy, that would do all these things for his father. He doesn't want him to because it will take away from his learning. So he said, I don't want you to do anything for me. So nonetheless, small things are allowed. The son can still fill up like a barrel, shalmaim of water, and air, and to light a candle. Why? Says the Ran, because the mastama memili zutri, something which is small, kihani, like these cases, the lakem who bittul alma Torah is not really a high level of bittul Torah. So this is the reason why, is because you can just assume that wasn't part of the cheshbon. He didn't want him to end up wasting a substantial amount of time, but for a short amount of time, it's not a big deal. Rav Yitzchak Aimer Litzlis Dog Katan, he even allows him to roast a small fish, which again is not something which is exceedingly time consuming, so therefore that wasn't part of his cheshbon. A person says, I'm not getting any hana from my friend. You're allowed to give and pour a kos of peace. So mind you, what is that? So hakar targimu kaishel beis avel. So when it came to someone who's in status of mourning, so there was a special cup, or the Gemara elsewhere says there's 10 kosos that were drunk by the house of the avel, so that was allowed to be poured. And the reason, as the Ran says, why it's allowed is mimnei darche shalim. Shani darkem akach. This is the way. Okay, fine. B'marava amri koishel beis hamerchatz. He says it's talking about a cup that was designated in a for someone who was using a bathhouse. So, and again on this, the Rashi here says hana muetasi. It's such a minute level of hana that wasn't part of the equation. And then we'll get to the Mishnah. So Tanya Yeshua ish uz oimer zon, you can fatten up avada v'shivchoisav hakananim, your non-Jewish slaves, because again they're there for working. So if you fatten them up, you're not really doing them a huge favor, because now all of a sudden you're not giving them the regular amount of food. That's also because you can't get hana, and you're helping this guy out because he doesn't have to feed his shivcha or eved. But we're talking about a situation where you give a lot to fatten them up, and fattening up an eved and shivcha is not a good thing. You should not give zaynis to an animal, ben tamei, ben tahara. So my time of why when it comes to them is it allowed? Because limit nachar rusa avida, because their whole purpose is specifically in order to clean up the house. Behema lipituma avida, an animal is being done to fatten it up, which again potentially could be for the sake of making a profit by selling it for its meat. But obviously you can't say that when it comes to people. Fine. Fine. And we look at the Ran over here, Koimer Lenaker Habayis Latashmish Mulvad. The Ikudagar Sinan, some say Leminar Rusa Koimer Shein Oindin Lachila. They're obviously not to be eaten, they're people. El Nachir Ba'alma, Kashain Masim, and when they die, menichanaisan, we leave them. The in adam oichlon, and no one eats them. We're not talking about cannibals over here, so therefore certainly they don't eat them. Okay, let's look at question 8. Mahu was, I'm going to stop there. Mahu lazoin, what's the din of feeding? An abdai kanani, which we said everyone holds you can, if it's to fatten him. Ubehemtoi hatameya is a machlokas. So this is a question 8. Mizainois hatsrichin lechtei chayehen, if it's food in which is just regular feeding, the usher hein be'eved, hein be'behema, doesn't make any difference. However, mizainois yiserim, like to fatten him up, be'eved is mutter, be'behema, as we said, is a machlokas. Okay, let's see, possibly one more question. Okay, good. Question TB 14. Ha'im mutter l'madir l'hasi bito l'mudir mimenu. Are you allowed? The person who made a neder, is he allowed to marry the guy's daughter? So he said, "Bayin bogeres, yes, because it was with her das. But a katana naira, no, since it's like getting someone to work mishamish for you." Let's see what the answer is over here. Katana v'nara aser bibogeres mutter adkan.